Welcome to my channel, I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today we're going to talk about 5 of my most used micro four thirds lens in 2021. Let's go! Now quickly, before we continue with today's video, if you are a current subscriber of my channel, thank you so much and welcome back to my channel, and hopefully you'll enjoy this video. If you are a new viewer, welcome also to my channel, and in this channel I will talk about photography, micro four thirds camera, lenses, and also music, home recording, guitar, rock, metal, and so on, alright? So if you're into that kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to my small channel to help me motivate me to keep making these videos for you. Alright, let's continue with the video. So in today's video, we're going to talk about my 5 most used lenses for micro four thirds in 2021. I've made a similar video last year in 2020 about my most used lenses as well, but some circumstances have already changed, my preference have already changed, my shooting style changed a little bit because I don't really travel that much this year. Also last year, because of the whole pandemic thing, we just stay at home a lot. But because of those changes, now I have preference toward lenses that I already own that I don't really use that much before. So this video we're going to talk about these lenses. As some of you already know, if you watch the news, if you watch some other YouTube videos from other channels, you might already know that there are lots of new cameras and lenses being launched from all sorts of different brands. From Canon, from Fuji, from Sony, full frame cameras, aps-c cameras, new lenses even for micro four thirds. And even though they look very tempting, the specification, they are so high, they are so good, I'm still sticking with my old micro four thirds cameras and lenses because I just think that these lenses and the cameras, they are all very reliable. I get good results out of them. Most of them are more than enough for my needs, for my travel photography, for my office needs, for my YouTube videos. They are more than enough, and I don't really see the need to upgrade to a new camera and lenses just yet. I'm still sticking with my old cameras and lenses. And without being further ado, this video is gonna talk about some of those old lenses, that I don't use that much last year and I start to use more and more this year. So let's start with the lenses themselves. First lens on today's video is this guy right here, the Laowa 7.5mm f2. So I've talked about this lens so many times before in my other videos. You can check my full review up here, and I will also link down below on the description other videos where I talk about this lens. But basically, this guy right here is an ultra wide angle lens with a field of view of 7.5mm, which is about 15mm in full frame. Very wide, and you can get a lot of things inside your frame easily with this lens. And also it has a large aperture of f2, which is pretty large, so you can use this for lower light situation or when you want to get a slightly shallower depth of field, that kind of stuff. And the combination of the focal length, the large aperture of f2, as well as the small size and relatively lightweight of this lens makes it a very unique lens in micro four thirds, and that's why I love it and I use it so much this year. Usually I use this lens during travel photography for a little bit of landscape photography, when you want to try to capture so many things inside the frame. You want to capture a beautiful scenery in front of you and you just want to use a wide angle lens, alright? But this time, because we don't really travel that much, so I use this lens more for like exterior, interior kind of photography, for a little bit of commercial work when I want to photograph the interior of a room, that kind of stuff. I don't really use this for travel yet this year. Hopefully next year when we get a chance to travel again, I will start to use this lens more and more again as I used it before. And for the drawback of this lens, I think there's only one. This is a manual focus only lens, so you have to learn how to use manual focus using this lens because my other lenses are automatic focusing. So it's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you start to understand how to use manual focus and you start to understand about hyperfocal distance and that kind of stuff, then it just becomes very easy. It's not really difficult at all, especially because it's a wide angle lens where most of the things are in focus anyway. So that's all about the Laowa 7.5 2.5mm f2. Now let's move on with the next lens. So next lens on the list, if you already subscribed to my channel, then this is no surprise for you. And I've already talked so many times about this lens before, and it's the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8. So this is a general purpose kind of zoom lens with large aperture of f2.8. So this goes from 12mm, which is wide angle, all the way to 35mm, which is a light telephoto. So you can do a lot of stuff with this lens only. Alright, you can do portrait photography, street photography, commercial, product, landscape. You can also do YouTube recording like what I'm doing right now. You can also record your B-rolls of your YouTube videos using this lens as well. So the application of this lens is very wide and very broad. This is such a versatile, flexible lens that you can use for almost everything. So if you need just a single lens for micro four thirds, I can highly recommend this lens. The thing that I like the most about this lens is the combination of the focal length of 12 to 35mm with the large aperture of f2.8, making it possible to capture things in lower light situation as well as to get bokeh, especially if you zoom it all the way to 35mm. If you don't know what bokeh is, it's that background blur kind of thing, you know, where everything looks very dreamy and smooth and only the object that you're focusing on is sharp. Now, there are lots of things that I really like from this lens. The build quality, so good, and it has weather sealing capabilities, so you can use it in weather that is not ideal. The zoom range from 12 to 35 is quite flexible, and it's, you know, the most used kind of focal length on this zoom range. And it has large aperture of f2.8. It has image stabilizer for smooth video footage, and also it has very fast autofocus mechanism, which really helps you to capture your shots quickly. But it's not all just about the great things. There are also things that I don't really like from this lens. First, f2.8 is pretty large, but sometimes I wish that this is f2. Alright, I'm nitpicking, but yeah, this is just what I really want. I want something that has slightly larger aperture than just f2.8 for those lower light conditions where I still need to crank up my shutter speed. So that's just one thing. And the other thing that I don't really like is that although this lens is small when you compare it to full frame or aps-c lenses, this is still large for micro four thirds standard. This is what I call small, and this is not as small. So yeah, if this is slightly smaller than right now, then I think it'll be perfect for me. But at this point, you can just ignore me because I'm just nitpicking, alright? So let's continue with the next lens. Next lens is the guy that's currently recording this video right now, the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7. Right now, you're looking at me through that lens, and that's how the image actually looks using that lens. I really like this lens, and this lens also made it to last year's list because it's such a versatile prime lens. So if this is what I call a versatile zoom lens, this Panasonic Leica is that prime version. It only has one single focal length, but that focal length, 15mm, in my opinion, is a very useful focal length for all sorts of different kind of purposes, especially for general kind of purpose photography, for street photography, for recording YouTube video like right now, for general out and about photography, food photography, environmental portrait. This looks really good, you know, and I really enjoy this lens. And one thing that I really love about this lens that making me to keep coming back to this lens is the fact that it is small, lightweight, easy to carry around. It has very good image quality and the large aperture of f1.7. Right now, I'm putting an ND filter on this lens during this video, so I can crank it up all the way to f1.7. And this is the background blur that you get from the f1.7 with this lens. Alright, so if you can see on my background, it's kind of blurred already, although you can still see traces of things like my guitars right there or my drawer right here. You know, you can still know what objects they are, but they start to look blurred so that I'm more in focus and more become the sort of attention of this video. And that's what I really like about this lens. So before the pandemic, I used this lens mostly for travel photography when I need aperture larger than f2.8 to complement this lens in lower light situation. But right now, because we don't travel as much, I use this lens mostly for my YouTube videos for recording the talking heads like right now. I used this lens previously, especially on the earlier part of 2021, but right now I started to gravitate more towards this lens because I just really like the overall look that I get from this lens when I'm making talking heads video like right now. Speaking of things that I don't really like from this lens, it's quite hard to find flaw with this lens because this is such a flawless lens. It's performing wonderfully, it is small, lightweight, easy to carry around, portable, it has great image quality and large aperture. What's not to like, right? But if I have to nitpick, there's one thing that I wish this lens has, and that is weather sealing, because it doesn't have one, and I wish that it has one so that I can use it for travel photography during weather that is less than ideal, when there are light shower, light drizzle, splashes of water. And I think that's it. So now let's move on with the next lens. Next lens, surprise! This is the Panasonic 35 to 100mm f2.8. So in 2020 and the years before that, I don't really actually use this lens all that much except for like event photography, alright? But this year, I'm starting to use this lens more and more, especially for my commercial photo and video kind of projects, for marketing materials and that kind of things, for recording YouTube video as well, I don't use it a whole lot like this lens right here or the Panasonic Leica 15mm, but I started to appreciate this lens more and more simply because it is a zoom lens with a large aperture of f2.8, and because this is a telephoto lens, I can get a background blur that is more dramatic when compared to this lens right here. Basically, this lens is like the couple of this lens right here. This is the telephoto version and it has weather sealing as well. It has image stabilizer that is kind of smooth. It has large aperture of f2.8 and the zoom range goes from 35 to 100, which is about 70 to 200mm in full frame, which is really good for portrait photography, for close-up product photography, for getting those kind of dramatic background blur kind of shots. This is the lens to do that. As I previously mentioned in my other videos, I'm not really a telephoto kind of guy, so even though this year I started to use this lens more and more, I still don't use it a lot, especially when compared to this lens or even the Panasonic Leica 15mm that's recording this video right now. And I think that's the only drawback of this lens that I really don't like. I really want to use telephoto lenses more and more so that I can appreciate them even more and start to become more creative, but I just don't find a lot of uses for this lens except for portrait and for close-up shots and getting background blur that are dramatic. Nevertheless, this is an excellent lens. This has all the things that you need from a telephoto lens: a great build quality, weather sealing, excellent image quality, large aperture, very smooth image stabilizer, all that kind of things that is already in this lens. So yeah, let's move on with the next lens. Last but not least, Panasonic 20mm f1.7. So this is a prime lens just like the 15mm and the Laowa 7.5mm. It has large aperture of f1.7, very similar to the Panasonic Leica 15mm. And this is a pancake lens. This is very small, very thin, very easy to carry around, portable, very lightweight, but it also has a very sharp image quality and large aperture of f1.7, which makes the background blur even more compared to the lens that's recording this video right now. So before the pandemic hits, I used this lens a lot also for travel photography, for street photography, for food photography, for general out and about photography, when I want something a little bit zoomed in so that the object becomes more dramatic and the background blur becomes more pronounced when compared to the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7. But because of the pandemic right now and And as I previously mentioned over and over, I don't travel as much as I used before. So I use this lens with the combination of this body to make YouTube thumbnails for my videos in my YouTube channel, because 20mm is such a flexible focal length as well, even though it's not as flexible as the 15mm in my opinion. But the fact that it's a little bit zoomed in, it makes the object pops even more when compared to the Panasonic Leica. And you know, the emphasis on the object is greater, so that if you're making thumbnails, it'll give you more impact, you know, because the background is more blurred. And also I can Photoshop it easily because the background is very blurred, and I can just use whatever random background and make my YouTube thumbnail more interesting, that kind of thing, you know. I don't really use this for my commercial product photography kind of project. I just use it for YouTube thumbnail. But nevertheless, because I'm making YouTube videos once every week or every 2 weeks or a few times a month, then this lens gets used a lot. There are lots of things that I really like from this lens. The fact that it is a pancake lens, it is a prime lens, so it's very small, it's very lightweight, the image quality is excellent, the large aperture of f1.7 is great. There's nothing that I don't really like from this lens, except from the fact that the autofocus speed is a little bit slow when compared to my other lens. But other than that, this is a perfect lens. So if you're looking for a general out and about photography or video lens that is a little bit zoomed in compared to the Panasonic Leica 15mm, then this is what you want. And that wraps up today's video. So that is all for today's video. I hope that you find this video to be useful. And please comment down below, what is your most used lens this year? Also, if you have any question about anything from this video, feel free to comment down below and I will try to answer them as best as I can. Also, don't forget to support my small channel by liking this video, sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel down below. Thank you and goodbye.